Arrival on Zephyria. The research vessel Hyperion descended through the atmosphere of Zephyria, its hull glowing red from the heat of entry. Inside, the expedition team prepared for landing, securing equipment and reviewing mission objectives. Dr. Ava Novak, the team's lead zoologist, felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. Zephyria was a goldmine for biological study, with its lush jungles and diverse fauna, but it was also largely uncharted and potentially dangerous. The apex predators that ruled this world were of particular interest and concern. As the ship touched down in a jungle clearing, the team gathered in the cargo bay. Commander Jake Sullivan addressed the group. "Remember, this is a research mission. Our top priority is to collect data and specimens while minimizing our impact on the local ecosystem. Stay alert and stick together out there." Ava and her colleagues, biologist Dr. Nate Okoy, botanist Dr. Mira Singh, and field tech Simon Reed, nodded in agreement. With a hiss of hydraulics, the cargo bay doors opened, and the team stepped out into the alien jungle. The heat hit them first, a wall of humidity that made it hard to breathe. Strange animal calls echoed in the distance, and the forest hummed with the buzz of insects. Ava marveled at the riot of color around them. Vivid green leaves, brilliant flowers in every hue, and glimpses of vibrant animal life in the canopy above. As the team began setting up base camp, Ava and Simon ventured out to place camera traps and sensors. The jungle grew denser as they pushed further in, the light filtering through in emerald shafts. Simon froze, listening intently. "Do you hear that? Sounds like something's in pain." Ava strained her ears and caught a faint, high-pitched mewling coming from a dense patch of undergrowth. She and Simon pushed forward, following the sound, and emerged into a small clearing. There, lying in a bed of ferns, was an injured apex predator cub. The cub was about the size of a large dog, with sleek black fur and striking silver markings. One of its hind legs was twisted at an unnatural angle, and it bared its teeth in a warning growl as they approached. Ava's heart raced. Getting this close to a juvenile apex predator was begging for trouble, but her instincts as a biologist and an animal lover wouldn't let her walk away. She activated her comm unit. "Commander, Dr. Novak here. We've got an injured apex predator cub in Sector 4. Permission to attempt a rescue and bring it back to base for treatment." There was a long pause before Sullivan replied. "Dr. Novak, you understand the risks involved. If the adults come looking for their cub, they could see us as a threat." Ava took a deep breath. "I understand, Commander, but I can't in good conscience leave an injured animal to suffer. This is also an unprecedented chance to study a juvenile up close. I believe the benefits outweigh the risks." Another pause, then Sullivan's voice came back. "Permission granted, Doctor. But exercise extreme caution and abort if there's any sign of adult predators in the area." "Understood." Novak out. Ava and Simon carefully approached the cub. It tried to stand, snarling in pain and fear, but collapsed with a pitiful whine. Ava pulled a tranquilizer kit from her pack, speaking softly. "Easy now, little one. We're here to help." She loaded a dart with a light sedative dose and took aim, praying her calculations of the cub's body weight were accurate. The dart flew true, striking the cub's flank. It yelped, then its eyes began to droop as the drug took hold. Together, Ava and Simon gently lifted the young predator, marveling at the power they could feel even in its juvenile form. As they bore it back to base camp, Ava hoped fervently that she had made the right call. Only time would tell if this act of interspecies mercy would lead to greater understanding or unforeseen consequences. Little did she know that a pair of intelligent eyes had watched the entire exchange from the concealing foliage, and even now, a sleek black shape was racing through the treetops, intent on reporting what it had seen to the rest of the pack. Nursing the cub, Ava and Simon arrived back at the base camp with the sedated cub, drawing surprised and wary looks from the rest of the team. Commander Sullivan approached, his expression stern. Dr. Novak, I hope you know what you're doing. If this goes sideways, it's on you. Ava met his gaze steadily. I understand, Commander. I take full responsibility for the cub's well-being and any potential fallout. With a curt nod, Sullivan stepped aside, allowing Ava and Simon to rush the cub to the medical lab. Dr. Nate Okoye, the team's biologist and medic, was already prepping the space. They laid the cub gently on the exam table, and Nate began his assessment. Looks like a clean break of the left femur, he reported, carefully palpating the injured leg. I'll need to set the bone and immobilize the limb. Ava, can you monitor vital signs? Ava nodded, attaching leads to the cub's chest and checking the readouts. Heart rate and respiration stable. It's a tough little guy. As Nate worked to splint the broken leg, Ava found herself stroking the cub's silky fur, marveling at its intricate silver markings. Up close, she could see old scars crisscrossing its hide, a testament to the harsh life it lived in the jungle. An hour later, the procedure was complete. The cub lay sleeping peacefully, its leg wrapped snugly in a polymer cast. Ava volunteered to take the first watch, settling into a chair beside the exam table. As the hours ticked by, she found herself talking softly to the cub, telling it about Earth and the wonders that awaited it when it woke. You're going to be okay, little one. We'll get you back on your feet and back to your family. I promise. Deep in the night, Ava was startled awake by a soft woof of breath. The cub was awake, its bright yellow eyes fixed on her. Ava held her breath, waiting to see how it would react. Slowly, cautiously, the cub stretched out its uninjured leg and placed its paw on Ava's hand. The gesture was so unexpectedly gentle that Ava felt tears spring to her eyes. "Hello there," she whispered. "I'm Ava. I'm here to help you." From that moment on, an unspoken bond began to form between woman and cub. Ava spent every spare moment with the recovering predator, hand-feeding it nutrient paste and massaging its injured leg. She talked to it constantly, telling it stories and singing old Earth lullabies. To the rest of the team's surprise, the cub seemed to thrive under Ava's care. It grew stronger every day, its playful personality emerging as it explored the confines of the medical lab. Ava knew she was walking a fine line, that the cub was a wild predator and not a pet. But she couldn't help the fierce love and protectiveness that welled up in her chest every time it nuzzled her hand or chuffed happily at her approach. Still, concerns arose as the cub continued to heal. Dr. Singh voiced what many were thinking when she pulled Ava aside one evening. "Ava, I know you've grown attached, but we need to start thinking about the endgame here. That cub belongs in the wild with its own kind. The longer we keep it, the harder the adjustment will be." Ava sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know, Mira. Believe me, I'm not blind to the reality of the situation. I can't help but feel that this little guy is special. That maybe, through him, we can learn to understand the apex predators better. Build a bridge, you know." Dr. Singh placed a comforting hand on Ava's shoulder. "It's a noble thought, but we have to be prepared for the possibility that the bridge may not hold. The adult predators may not take kindly to us interfering with their young." Ava knew she was right. But looking at the cub, which had fallen asleep with its head trustingly in her lap, she couldn't bring herself to sever the bond that had grown between them. Not yet. There was still so much to learn, so much potential for understanding. In the jungle beyond the base camp perimeter, hidden eyes watched and waited. The pack had not forgotten their missing cub, and their patience was wearing thin. Learning to communicate. As the cub's leg healed, and it began to move around more, Ava noticed something extraordinary. The young predator seemed to be watching her intently, cocking its head as she spoke as if trying to understand her words. It would chuff and chirp in response, vocalizations that sounded almost like attempts at mimicry. Intrigued, Ava began to spend even more time with the cub, which she had begun calling Zephyr after the swift, playful winds that swept through the jungle canopy. She set up a series of simple cognition tests, using colored blocks and puzzle boxes filled with treats. To her astonishment, Zephyr quickly grasped the concepts, solving the puzzles with an ease that belied a keen intelligence. Ava brought her observations to the rest of the team, her excitement palpable. "I think we've been underestimating the cognitive abilities of the apex predators," she said, pulling up video feeds of Zephyr's puzzle solving. "If Zephyr is any indication, they may have capacities for problem solving and abstract thinking that rival some of Earth's most intelligent species." Dr. Okoye leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "It's certainly compelling evidence, but intelligence doesn't necessarily equate to human-like communication. How do we bridge that gap?" Ava grinned. "I have an idea." She pulled out a small device from her pack, a translingual communicator designed to parse and translate alien languages. "If I can input enough of Zephyr's vocalizations and body language cues, the AI might be able to start building a rudimentary dictionary, a foundation for two-way communication." The team exchanged glances, some skeptical, others intrigued. Commander Sullivan spoke up. "Dr. Novak, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, I have to remind you that our primary mission is observation and data collection, not interspecies diplomacy. Don't let your attachment to the cub cloud your judgment." Ava met his eyes, her gaze determined. "With all due respect, Commander, I believe this is a vital part of our mission. If we can establish even a basic dialogue with an apex species, think of the scientific and diplomatic implications. It could change everything." Sullivan held her gaze for a long moment, then sighed. "Very well, Doctor. Proceed with your communication project, but keep me apprised of any developments, and be prepared to adjust course if necessary." With the commander's conditional blessing, Ava threw herself into the work. Every interaction with Zephyr became a data point, every vocalization and gesture carefully recorded and fed into the translingual AI. It was slow, painstaking work, but Ava found herself energized by the challenge and the tantalizing glimpses of progress. Late one night, as Ava sat with Zephyr in the dimly lit lab, the cub placed a paw on the translingual communicator and let out a series of chirps and chuffs. The device processed for a moment, then a synthesized voice spoke. "Ava, friend." Ava's heart leaped into her throat. She stared at Zephyr, hardly daring to breathe. "Yes," she whispered. "Ava, friend. Zephyr, friend." Zephyr chuffed, his yellow eyes bright. "Friend," the device translated. It was a simple word, but it carried the weight of a milestone. A bridge tentatively crossed. From that moment, progress accelerated. Zephyr quickly grasped the concept of attaching words to objects, actions, and even abstract ideas. Ava marveled at his aptitude, at the complex thoughts that emerged haltingly through the translator. But even as they celebrated this breakthrough, a sense of unease began to grow among the team. Scout drones had captured footage of adult apex predators in the jungle nearby, behaving in ways that suggested increasing agitation. They could sense the presence of humans, and they knew their cub was missing. Dr. Singh voiced the thought on everyone's mind. "We may be running out of time. If the pack decides to attack, we won't stand a chance." Ava looked at Zephyr, feeling a tightness in her chest. She knew what she had to do, for Zephyr's sake and for the sake of the mission. But the thought of letting him go, of severing the bond they had built, felt like a physical ache. In the end, it wasn't Ava's choice to make. The pack made the decision for her. The hunters become the hunted. It was a quiet evening in the base camp when the perimeter alarms began to blare. Ava jolted upright from where she had been dozing next to Zephyr's bed, her heart racing. She knew, with a sinking certainty, what the alarms meant. The adult predators had finally lost patience. They were coming for their cub. The base erupted into controlled chaos as the team scrambled to action stations. Commander Sullivan's voice crackled over the comms, steady but tense. "All personnel, this is not a drill. Apex predators have breached the outer perimeter. Prepare for potential hostile engagement." Ava's first instinct was to run to Zephyr, to protect him. But as she sprinted towards the lab module, Dr. Singh's voice stopped her in her tracks. "Ava, wait. We need you in the command center. If anyone can find a way to de-escalate this, it's you." Ava hesitated, torn. But she knew Mira was right. Her place was at the negotiating table, not the battlefield. With a last, anguished look towards the lab, she turned and raced to join the rest of the command team. In the command center, the mood was grim. Video feeds showed at least 6 adult apex predators stalking the perimeter, their sleek forms blending into the gathering dusk. They had not yet made any overtly aggressive moves, but their intent was clear. They wanted their cub back, and they were prepared to fight for him. Commander Sullivan turned to Ava, his face drawn. "Dr. Novak, you've had the most contact with the cub. What's our play here? Is there any chance of a peaceful resolution?" Ava's mind raced, weighing options. "I think our best chance is to show them that we mean no harm to Zephyr, that we've been helping him, not holding him captive. If we can find a way to communicate that, to let them see him." Dr. Okoye spoke up, his voice strained. "Ava, I know you formed a bond with Zephyr. We all have. But we need to consider the possibility that the safest thing, for him and for us, is to let him go, to return him to his pack before this escalates any further." Ava felt as if a vice was squeezing her heart. She knew, logically, that Nate was right. Zephyr belonged with his own kind, in the wild. Keeping him would only lead to more conflict, more danger for everyone involved. But the thought of losing him, of saying goodbye to the extraordinary being she had come to love, was almost unbearable. The decision was taken out of her hands by a shout from the security officer monitoring the video feeds. "Sir, one of the predators has broken through the inner perimeter. It's headed straight for the lab module." Ava felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Zephyr was in the lab, alone and unprotected. Without a second thought, she bolted for the door, ignoring the shouts of her teammates. She had to get to him, had to keep him safe. Nothing else mattered. As she sprinted across the compound, she could hear the sound of rending metal and shattering glass coming from the direction of the lab. Fear lent her speed, but she knew she might already be too late. She burst through the ruined door of the module, frantically scanning for any sign of Zephyr. The lab was in ruins, equipment smashed and scattered. And there, in the center of the destruction, stood an adult apex predator, its black form lean and lethal. Ava's heart seized as she saw the limp, silver-marked body dangling from its jaws. "No," she whispered, despair crashing over her in a wave. She had failed him, failed Zephyr when he needed her most. Zephyr's choice. The adult predator's eyes locked onto Ava as she stood frozen in the doorway, her heart in her throat. It lowered Zephyr's limp form to the ground, baring its fangs in a warning snarl. Ava knew she should be terrified, but all she could feel was a numb, aching despair. Then, miraculously, Zephyr stirred. His eyes fluttered open, and he let out a weak but unmistakable chuff. He was alive. Injured, but alive. Ava's paralysis broke. She took a step forward, hands outstretched pleadingly. "Please," she said, hardly recognizing her own voice. "Please don't hurt him. He's just a cub. We were trying to help him." The adult predator's snarl intensified, and it placed a protective paw over Zephyr. But it made no move to attack. It seemed torn, confused by the lack of aggression from this small, strange creature. Zephyr looked from his packmate to Ava, his yellow eyes bright with intelligence and some unreadable emotion. Then, slowly and deliberately, he pushed himself to his feet. He limped out from under the adult's paw, ignoring its warning growl, and made his way towards Ava. Ava held her breath, hardly daring to move. Zephyr reached her and pressed his head against her hand, a gesture of trust and affection. Then he turned back to face his packmate and let out a series of chirps and chuffs, punctuated by a lowering of his head and a sweeping gesture with his paw. Submission, deference, and unmistakable communication. The adult predator stared, its snarl fading to a confused rumble. It looked from Zephyr to Ava, then back again. Some unspoken understanding seemed to pass between them. Slowly, warily, the adult lowered its head, mirroring Zephyr's submissive posture. Ava's heart raced. She understood, with a surge of hope and wonder, what was happening. Zephyr was vouching for her, telling his packmate that she was not a threat, but a friend. Keeping her movements slow and unthreatening, Ava reached for the translingual communicator at her belt. She held it out, letting both predators see it clearly. "Friend," she said, echoing that first, groundbreaking word that Zephyr had spoken. Ava friend. Human friend. The adult predator regarded her for a long, tense moment. Then, to Ava's shock, it chuffed. The same vocalization Zephyr used for friend. It had understood. The standoff ended as abruptly as it had begun. The adult predator turned and loped out of the ruined lab, back towards the perimeter and the rest of the waiting pack. Zephyr remained at Ava's side a moment longer, leaning into her touch as she stroked his fur with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered, blinking back tears. "You saved my life. Saved all of us." Zephyr chuffed softly. Then, with a final muzzle, he turned and limped after his packmate, back towards the jungle and his own kind. Ava watched him go, her heart a riot of conflicting emotions. Pride, wonder, grief, and above all, a bittersweet sort of joy. She knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that this was not the end of their story, only the beginning of a new chapter. In the days that followed, a wary peace settled over the base camp. The adult predators no longer stalked the perimeter but watched from a distance, their posture cautious but no longer overtly hostile. And Zephyr became a regular visitor, often accompanied by one or two of his packmates. The breakthrough in communication that Ava had dreamed of became a reality. Using the translingual tech and Zephyr as a bridge, a tentative dialogue began to grow between humans and apex predators. It was halting at first, limited by the constraints of the technology and the vast differences in experience and perspective. But it was a start. As the trust grew, so did the exchange of knowledge. The predators, it turned out, had a complex social structure and a deep understanding of the jungle ecosystem that rivaled any human expert. And they were intensely curious about these strange, soft creatures that had come from the sky, with their bizarre tools and their incomprehensible machines. Ava found herself at the center of this exchange, spending long hours with Zephyr and his packmates, learning their ways and teaching them what she could of human culture and science. It was exhilarating, groundbreaking work, the kind of thing most xenobiologists only dreamed of. But even as the mission became a resounding success, Ava knew that it couldn't last forever. The time was coming when the human team would have to leave Zephyria, to return to Earth and share their discoveries with the wider galaxy. And as much as it pained her, Ava knew that Zephyr could not come with them. His place was here, with his pack, in the wild jungles of his homeworld. To take him away from that would be to rob him of his very nature. The goodbyes, when they came, were bittersweet. Zephyr and his packmates gathered at the edge of the jungle to see the human team off, their postures solemn and their eyes bright with understanding. Ava knelt before Zephyr, fighting back tears as she pressed her forehead to his. "I'll never forget you," she whispered. "What you taught me, what we shared. You changed my life. Zephyr, changed everything." Zephyr chuffed softly, nuzzling into her touch. "Ava friend," the translingual device intoned. "Always friend." As the research vessel lifted off, carrying the team back towards the stars, Ava watched the jungle recede below them. She could just make out the sleek, black forms of the apex predators, standing witness until the ship vanished into the clouds. She carried their memory with her, a bright, shining thing in her heart. The knowledge of a bond that transcended species and worlds, of a friendship that had changed the course of two cultures forever. Ava didn't know what the future held, but she knew that wherever she went, whatever discoveries lay ahead, a part of her would always remain on Zephyria, running beneath the alien stars with a friend who had taught her the true meaning of communication and trust. It was a gift beyond measure, a story that would be told and retold, inspiring generations to come. The story of a woman, a cub, and the unbreakable bond they forged across the light years. The story of Ava and Zephyr, and the dawn of a new era of understanding between two worlds.